I was prepared. I had visions of our future, had even gone so far as to set up a hidden savings account for the once-in-a-lifetime trip around the world we planned to take in a few years. So, when I saw my wife, Tracy, at her small college's annual employee gathering in mid-September, I knew something was wrong. As the 45-year-old chatted with a handful of her colleagues, I watched from 50 feet away as a deep crimson blush spread across her cheeks. And then I watched as it lingered. Earlier, I'd been introduced to the man she was talking to now, Ralph Searcy, an associate professor of English literature. He, Tracy, and another administrative assistant named Janet were in a small circle, laughing. There could be only one explanation for a blush like that, especially one that wouldn't fade. She was intensely, sexually aroused. It was the only thing that made sense. Given that this was a Christian college, I highly doubted either of the others had made an off-color remark. And just like that, an answer was provided to a question I hadn't even thought to ask. After 23 years of marriage, 25 years together, you learn just about everything there is to know about your spouse. That is, if you're truly connected. I knew all of Tracy's tells, as a poker player might say, the tells of her arousal. Just 10 minutes ago, I had been convinced I was married to the perfect woman. Now, certain odd behaviors from the past few months, things I hadn't recognized as strange at the time, were beginning to click into place. We had two wonderful children, and were, I thought, the best of friends and lovers. We were one of those rare couples who could spend days in each other's company without a moment of boredom. Laughter was a constant ingredient in our conversations, which could range from sex to history and everything in between. Our sex life, I thought, was fantastic. It had cooled from the tumultuous passion of our early years, but it had roared back to life when our youngest left for college the year before. With the house to ourselves for most of the year, our voracious appetites returned, and we were making love, passionately and thrillingly, 3 or 4 times a week. We were both in excellent physical shape for our age. Tracy, with her long blonde hair, generous bust, and a landscape of curves, was comfortable in her skin. I'd put on 20 pounds of muscle since college and had 25 years of experience in using my hands and mouth to please my wife. But something had changed 2 months ago. The sex had gotten better, wilder. Tracy, who rarely initiated, was suddenly taking the lead as often as I did. The physical exertion was insane. I didn't question it. I wasn't about to look a gift horse in the mouth. But looking back, I realized that's when our intimacy shifted. It was still fantastic, but it became just sex. The focus had changed. For the rest of the night, Tracy and Ralph remained within 5 feet of each other. From what I could see, her glow returned every time he was near, regardless of my presence. Whenever she'd drift away from him, she'd find someone else to talk to, but they would seem to vanish the moment I approached. I watched them covertly, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. When Ralph was there, Tracy seemed oblivious to everyone else. Not once did I see her glance around the room, as if looking for her husband. She took every opportunity to let her hand brush against his. Once I was certain of what I was seeing, my mild unease curdled into a cold, intense fury. It seemed my marriage was ending right before my eyes. Around 11, I practically had to drag her away from Ralph's side. When I walked up and told her it was time to go, she did not look pleased. Her expression flashed from anger to placid calm, but not before I saw the shift. The car ride home was shrouded in a heavy silence. Normally, we would have chattered non-stop about the evening, but I deliberately said nothing, waiting for her to speak first. She stared out the passenger window for what felt like an eternity before finally noticing the unsettling quiet. She then launched into some trivial comment about the college president's wife's poor taste in fashion. I didn't respond. "I'm really exhausted," she said when we got home. "I'm going to bed. Are you coming?" I couldn't tell if she wanted me there or was just trying to avoid any further conversation. I told her I'd stay up and watch some TV. I saw the flicker of disappointment in her eyes. The following week was a masterclass in tension. I pretended not to be worried, but I was checking Tracy's whereabouts half a dozen times a day, using the Find My Phone app on my iPhone. She was always exactly where she was supposed to be, and she didn't seem to mind making love in the evenings. On Tuesday, however, the app showed she had gone home for lunch. 15 minutes later, I let myself silently into my own house, my heart pounding with the certainty that my marriage was over. I didn't have to sneak upstairs to confirm it. The tumultuous sounds coming from our bedroom told me everything. I heard Ralph's name, and then Tracy's voice, crying out, "Oh, Ralph! Oh, God, baby, you're the best!" The pain was so sharp it took my breath away. For a split second, pure impulse urged me to storm into that room and slit the bastard's throat. But I stopped myself. If I went in there, I knew I would beat him until he was dead, and neither of them was worth a prison sentence. This may sound narcissistic, but the truth is, I adore my husband. For 25 years, I have loved him. My deepest desire was to have him by my side for another 25, but I also have to confess that I've been having an affair. My lover was so extraordinary that I couldn't bear to let him go, though I knew I had to if I wanted to save my marriage. My wonderful husband, Mike, would be devastated to learn I was seeing someone else, which is why I did everything I could to hide it. Mike has been my rock since we first met. Our marriage has lasted 23 years, and we've been blessed with two amazing children. He was my best friend, my soulmate, and a fantastic lover. We talked about everything. We laughed constantly. At least, we did until recently. I never intended to take a lover, but then I met Ralph Searcy. He walked into the administration building a few days before the school year started, and it's no exaggeration to say my world was turned upside down. Ralph was in his late 30s with a strong build, short brown hair, and kind gray eyes. He wasn't a movie star, but when he looked at me, something inside me ignited. For the rest of the day, I couldn't get him out of my head. I felt a surge of guilt, and for the next 2 weeks, I threw myself at Mike, and we made love until we were exhausted. Then my opportunity arrived. My beloved husband was going out of town for a night. With my hands trembling, I called Ralph on Monday and invited him to lunch on Wednesday. He didn't have any classes, so I took the day off. We met at a small Italian place, and the lunch was filled with talk and laughter. I couldn't stop myself from giggling and touching his arm as we spoke. I felt like a blushing, awkward teenager on a first date. Within 5 minutes of sitting down, my panties were completely soaked. We never spoke of sex, but Ralph knew. He met my smiles with his own, held my hand across the table, and I could see the same desire mirrored in his eyes. He paid the bill like a gentleman and asked, "Where to?" "My place," I said, with a surge of newfound confidence. "It's 10 minutes from here. Leave your car." As we drove, I was still anxious, even though I knew Mike wouldn't be back until Thursday night. I was conscious of my 45-year-old body, the body that had carried 2 children. But strangely, I felt no remorse for what I was about to do. No matter how much I loved Mike, I knew I was going to be with Ralph, and I wouldn't let guilt ruin it. The moment I parked in the garage, I hit the button to close the door. The next 10 hours were among the most memorable of my life. The connection I felt with Ralph was electric, and he seemed to feel the same. Mike had always been my ideal sexual partner, but Ralph recalibrated the entire scale. He was tall and solid like Mike, but he was built on an entirely different level, impressively proportioned in every way. Our lovemaking was a storm of pleasure and a ravenous hunger for more. It was all so good. By the time Ralph finally called an Uber to retrieve his car, I had lost count of my orgasms and felt as weak and spent as a wet rag. As we shared our last kiss of the day, Ralph said, "You are an extraordinary woman, Tracy." It was, without a doubt, the best lay of my life. When Tracy McGowan called me, I knew what she was after. I saw the way she reacted when we first met in the admin building. After that lunch, I had a feeling we'd end up in bed, even though she never said it outright. The woman had a pretty face, a great chest, and long blonde hair. It was obvious she was a MILF. She could stand to lose a few pounds, but I wasn't about to turn her down. The first thing I notice on a woman is a wedding ring, but I've learned that doesn't mean much. In fact, I've found that married women are the best. They're usually more experienced, and anything even slightly out of the ordinary drives them wild. After a nice lunch, she took me to her house, and we spent most of the afternoon enjoying her marital bed. Her husband was clearly out of town for the day, so we went at it all afternoon. Compared to the other women I'd been with, she was the most physically responsive I'd ever had. She was the peak of my sexual experience so far. As my Uber drove me back to my car, I couldn't help but hope there would be more days just like that one. I was stunned by the depth of Tracy's deceit. For the next week, she continued to play the part of the perfect wife, all while I quietly prepared for our impending divorce. Mike. When I met with my lawyer the following Wednesday morning, she informed me that Tracy would be served the following week. I'd filed for divorce on the grounds of adultery, even though we lived in a no-fault state. A pointless gesture, I know, but it felt necessary. I keep asking myself how I could have pushed my wife into another man's arms. Was it because he was 15 years younger than me and he could make love more often? This wasn't some drunken mistake. The tracking app on her phone confirmed it. Tracy had come home during her lunch break 3 more times in the last 10 days. I didn't need to drive home to catch her in the act. I already knew she wasn't there making herself grilled cheese sandwiches. The thought made me laugh, a bitter, hollow sound. Just then, I was searching our pantry for a pack of brown sugar cinnamon Pop-Tarts, but I couldn't find any. I'd eaten the second to last pack yesterday, so I knew there should have been one left. Fantastic. Raph was sleeping with my wife and eating my snacks. I knew Tracy wouldn't touch them. Pop-Tarts were her sworn enemy. The nerve of that guy, Tracy. I had the best sex of my life on Thursday, and I woke up Friday morning feeling like $1 million. I suppose I should have felt guilty, but the truth was, I just wanted more. Before Mike left for work, I said my goodbyes. Then I texted Raf. My husband won't be home until 9 tonight. If you came over right after he leaves at 5, we'd have time for another round, maybe two. I love a woman with initiative, he replied. The sound of his car pulling into the garage sent a jolt of pure, liquid heat through me. I'm not sure about much, but I am certain I was completely naked by the time he walked through the door. I'm so glad you called, Raf breathed. We tried to make it slow, missionary, full of lingering passion. It was a beautiful failure. The urgency was too much, the need too great. It didn't matter how we tried. Every touch, every thrust was perfect. Around 7:30, Raf left. After only 2 days in the same bed with him, I stripped the sheets and changed them, burying the used set at the bottom of the laundry basket. I felt incredible as I stepped into the shower. 90 minutes later, Mike walked in. I kissed my husband with everything I had. My heart belonged to this man. But when Mike practically pulled me into the bedroom, hungry for his own affection, I have to admit, a sliver of guilt pricked at me. I had never made love to two different men in a single day. The thought, frankly, was unbearably hot. As we lay tangled together later, I whispered, "That was fantastic, Mike." And I meant it. Mike was a wonderful lover in his own right. But what I had with Raf was phenomenal. It felt like a completely different act than what Mike and I shared. Sex with Raf was a physical event, an incredible sensation completely separate from my married life. Sex with Mike was about emotion, and we were doing it twice a week. I knew it couldn't last forever, but I was determined to savor every moment I could. Mike, at 10 o'clock on Wednesday morning, I got the call. Tracy had been served. It took a full 2 minutes before my phone rang again. She was sobbing. "Mike, no, I don't want a divorce. And I don't want a cheating wife," I said. "But we don't always get what we want, do we?" "I can explain. I made a decision for myself. A decision we need to talk about," Tracy began, her voice choked with tears. "No, we don't need to discuss your decision," I cut her off. "You ignored our vows. You ignored us. So I made a decision for myself too." I'd gotten a lot of work done, but I was prepared for what I'd face when I got home. Tracy didn't disappoint. The moment I walked in, she started shouting, "Don't you think you owed me a conversation before filing for divorce? We've been married for 23 years. Why? Those 23 years didn't seem to matter to you when you were cheating on me." Repeatedly, I shot back. Her makeup was smeared, her eyes bloodshot. She'd clearly been crying for hours. "I love you, Mike. What I had with Raf was just physical. It was—" I finished the sentence for her. "A decision for yourself." She looked agitated. "I'm sorry, I hurt you, but I think you're overreacting. We can talk through this." "I don't see how, Tracy. You cheated multiple times, probably more than I even know." "I know it looks bad, Mike, but I know, Tracy. It was just a decision for yourself," I repeated, letting the words hang in the air. "Why don't you explain it to me?" I'm sure she heard the sarcasm, but she smiled, seeming to take it as encouragement. "I can't explain it, but it's like we have this special, physical connection. He makes my legs turn to jelly when he's near me, and it's the best sex you've ever had." I finished for her. I heard. For the first time, she looked terrified. Her eyes went wide as saucers. You heard? She stammered. You want me to play it back for you? I was in the house last week. You were so busy making a mistake you can never take back. You didn't even hear me come in. She finally had the decency to look away in shame. It was purely physical, Mike. I love you. I can't tell you how much I love you. Can't we at least try counseling? I know I hurt you, but I know you still love me. The worst part was, she was right about that last part. The love that's been built over 25 years doesn't just vanish, but it had been chipped away, eroded, and now it was almost gone. Tracy. Even though I knew the risks, I was still stunned when I was served with divorce papers at work on a Wednesday afternoon. I had no idea Mike knew about the affair. Not only did he know, but he'd apparently recorded Raph and me in bed. He'd heard me praise Raph, heard me say it was the best I'd ever had. Oh God. I was convinced Mike's love for me would triumph. My first strategy was to persuade him to let me keep the affair with Raph. Only after that failed would I try to save the marriage. I suggested therapy. He agreed. Our first session with the counselor was a disaster. She was a woman, and I'd hoped she might offer some compassion, maybe even take my side. Instead, she shared Mike's inability to understand my powerlessness against Raph's charm. So, Mrs. McGowan, she said after I told my story, did your vows mean nothing to you? No, they mean everything to me. But this is different, I explained. I've never experienced anything like it. You're a woman. You felt that spark of attraction. It's like that, but 100 times stronger, I pressed on. It's almost like being drugged. I could see from her expression she wasn't buying it. Mike just looked bewildered. They say men think with their little brain, the counselor said, turning to me. But if you look at today's divorce statistics, women are just as guilty. Yes, that spark exists, but most people understand they have a choice to ignore it. You chose to give in to your primal desires. I couldn't believe this woman was accusing me of lacking self-control. She might as well have called me a slut. But it was her next question that sealed our divorce. If Mike could forgive you and take you back, do you believe you would be able to resist your physical urges and remain faithful to your husband? I had hoped for an ally. Instead, I got an executioner. I sat there, frozen, unable to even attempt an answer. Mike could read my lies better than any polygraph. I love you, Mike, I pleaded, tears streaming down my face. Please, you have to help me. I don't love him, but I have to have him. It's the best sex of my life. Don't ask me to give that up. I looked over at Mike, hoping to see his resolve weaken. He'd said he still loved me, but his eyes were lifeless. Nothing. I love you too, Tracy, he said, his voice flat. But I will not be cheated on, and I will never forgive you for the pain you've caused. I'm sorry I wasn't man enough for you. You are more than enough man, Mike. I love you. If giving him up is what it takes for us to stay together, I'll do it. Please, just keep trying to help us. It's too late, he replied. Don't blame me. You left us the first time you slept with that asshole. I just never realized how selfish you were, how it was all about you. You don't love me, not the way I loved you. 2 weeks after our last counseling session, I was in my bedroom, riding Raph like a stallion. I didn't know if Mike was watching, and I no longer cared. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. Throughout that time, I had countless sessions with Raph. Each one was extraordinary. He was my Achilles heel. Despite my feelings for Mike, I was addicted to Raph. I couldn't resist him. And because of that, I knew I would never hear from Mike again. He was too unloving to let me have Raph. Mike! Mike! If you really loved me, Tracy had screamed, her voice filled with a delusion of grandeur I couldn't comprehend. She had actually tried to convince me to let her keep her lover while we remained married. I may have been a naive cuckold, but I wasn't going to be a willing one. Our first counseling session was a train wreck. The therapist all but called my wife a whore. After the fourth session, she told Tracy there was no point in continuing, assuring her that she supported my position and that I wouldn't be changing my mind. I thought Tracy was going to collapse. My daughters did their best to intervene. When I told my youngest, she sobbed, "Daddy, you're tearing the family apart." "No, sweetheart," I told her gently. "I'm not tearing the family apart. Your mother already did that. I'm just making it legal." She frowned, thinking it over. "I guess you're right, Daddy," she finally whispered. Raph. I felt a little bad about upsetting Tracy's husband, but I preferred to ignore their marital problems. We had an incredible physical connection, and the sex was almost supernatural. I knew she loved the guy too. It was between them, and I couldn't blame him for not wanting to be a cuckold. My job wasn't to psychoanalyze, it was to perform. After Mike filed for divorce, Tracy avoided me for 2 weeks. But when he refused to take her back, we resumed our affair. With Mike out of the picture, she started paying more attention to me, and things got even better. It was the best sex of my life. I never imagined it would last this long. At 45, marriage was the last thing on his mind. I, on the other hand, had always planned on having a family of my own, while she already had 2 grown children. And in the worst way imaginable, she had committed a truly disgusting act against the very person she claimed to love more than anything in the world. I kept trying to find the one, but I refrained from ever discussing it with Tracy. She had enough on her plate after losing Mike. Everything changed about a year after Tracy's divorce when I met Lucy Ralston. We hit it off immediately. She was 24, with short brown hair and the slender, graceful build of a dancer. For a while, I kept Lucy a secret from Tracy, but after about 2 months, I finally came clean. I knew my actions had hurt Tracy, but I didn't think she truly loved me anyway. While we shared a powerful physical connection, our emotional bond was more like that of best friends. It fell to me to tell Tracy that Lucy and I were getting serious. "But I left my husband for you," Tracy sobbed when I broke the news. "No, you didn't," I replied. "You left your husband to sleep with me. There was never an us. There was just fantastic sex. And that was your choice. But this is my choice. My choice is a wife and a family." Hearing Raph say he was ending our affair to be with Lucy shattered me. The words tumbled out of my mouth before I could stop them. "But I left my husband for you." Tears welled in my eyes. The look on Raph's face was one of pure sympathy. "No," he said gently. "You left your husband to have sex with me. As much as it stung, I knew he was right." Then came the humiliation of my children learning the truth. After our split, Mike didn't mince words. He told them I'd had affairs, all for what he bitterly called the best sex of your mother's life. Our children were devastated, but eventually, they grew up and moved on. A year and a half later, I looked even worse when I had to tell them that Raph had left me to start a family with a younger woman. Though I never explicitly asked them not to, I prayed they wouldn't tell their father. During the Christmas holiday, my eldest daughter casually asked if my kids would be meeting my boyfriend. I had to admit that we had broken up. So you threw away a quarter century of love with Dad for a few years of sex with some younger guy. My daughter spat. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. A few years of the best sex of your life. I was speechless. I just stared at the floor. Losing Raph was nothing compared to losing Mike. Raph had been a fantastic lover, but Mike was my one true love, my entire world. After he was gone, at least I still had the thrill of our trysts several times a week. It was painful, but it was something. When Raph left, I had nothing. The loneliness was crushing, which is why I suppose I dove into the dating scene so quickly. Surprisingly, most of the men who showed interest were in their 30s, some even in their 20s. Maybe this older woman didn't look so bad for 47. Many of them were pleasant enough, but none of them measured up to my ex. Perhaps it was because I'd been out of the game for so long, but I couldn't help but notice how much expectations had changed in 25 years, especially among the younger men. It seemed if sex wasn't on the table for the first date, there wouldn't be a second. Not that I'm a prude, but I wasn't looking to sleep with just anyone. When it did happen, the sex was usually enjoyable, and my partners seemed satisfied, but most of it was just a fling. I suppose I never dated anyone long enough to build the kind of passion for true lovemaking. How I yearned for that again. Whenever I spoke to the kids, I tried to subtly ask about Mike. I clung to the hope of winning him back, assuming there was no chance he was seeing anyone. Our marriage had lasted 23 years. I knew if anything was going to happen, I would have to be the one to make the first move. A few days later, I worked up the courage to call him. I know what I did hurt you, and I'm so sorry, I began, but I'd really like for us to be friends. Maybe grab coffee sometime, or a meal. I really miss just sitting and talking with you. There was a pause. Um, I suppose we could do that, Tracy, he said, a hint of reserved approval in his voice. I do miss your company, and I think I'm in a much better place now. We agreed to meet for coffee the following Saturday. When Tracy walked into the Starbucks, she looked absolutely stunning. The 2 years since we'd last seen each other hadn't touched her. She hadn't aged a day, and she wore the same familiar pullover that accentuated her generous chest. With barely any makeup on, her natural beauty shone through. I stood to greet her, but froze, unsure whether to hug her. She solved my dilemma by rushing forward, kissing me on the cheek, and wrapping me in a tight embrace. I returned the hug, honestly wondering why some man hadn't already swept her off her feet. She blushed beautifully. It seems not everyone shares your impeccable taste, she replied with a smile. We ordered coffee and pastries, and the conversation flowed as easily as it always had when we were married. We talked about everything and nothing. It was so comfortable that we stayed for a second cup. As we got up to leave, I said, "This was fun, Tracy. How about we do lunch next time?" Her eyes widened in surprise. "Absolutely," she whispered. "That would be wonderful. Give me your phone. I'll put my new number in." 2 weeks later, I called her to arrange it. It had been over 25 years since I'd been on any kind of date. The way Tracy had treated me had left me heartbroken, and I'd avoided women like the plague ever since the divorce. That Saturday, we had a lovely meal at our old favorite Italian restaurant. I could tell she was hoping for an invitation back to my apartment afterward, but that was a step I wasn't ready to take. I walked her to her car, gave her a kiss on the cheek, and went to my own vehicle. Over the next year, we had several more pleasant lunches. I kept it to lunches because I felt more in control. The next step, in my mind, was dinner, and dinner could lead to something else. I wasn't ready for that. Mike it seemed, had grown wiser over the years. He always seemed to enjoy our time together, but he never once suggested dinner. I kept hoping he'd just show up at my door one day, ready to spend the night. I knew he wasn't dating anyone, and I figured if I could just get him into bed once, I'd have a chance to win him back. But he never gave me that chance. You can't exactly seduce a man over lunch at a diner. By Monday, I was back on the dating apps, resigning myself to being just another statistic. I went 5 years without dating a single woman. Tracy had messed me up that badly. The lunches with her were never dates in my book, though I know she saw them differently. One day, I was in my usual liquor store, browsing the tequila selection, when I sensed a presence to my right. A woman was engaged in the same activity. She was attractive, and I thought I'd offer my expertise. "Are you planning on sipping that or mixing it?" I asked, with a charming smile. "I would never drown a good tequila," she replied. "I drink my tequila like I drink my coffee, straight up. Nothing in it. Margaritas are for parties. When I'm serious, I don't mix." Wow, a purist. I couldn't remember the last time I'd met a woman who drank tequila neat. I turned to get a proper look at her. Oh no, she was a straight tequila drinker, and she was gorgeous. No ring on her left hand or her right. She looked a little younger than me, with wavy, shoulder-length, dark auburn hair and dazzling blue eyes. Irish, I thought, just like me. I didn't realize I was staring until her voice cut through my thoughts. "Subtle," she said, "very subtle." I felt my face flush. "My apologies. I was just taking it all in. A dozen tequila brands and a beautiful woman who knows how to drink it. That doesn't happen often in my world." She gave me a wry smile. "In what world would that be, Mr. Tequila Snob?" "Lucerville, USA, ma'am," I murmured. "Ma'am?" she asked, her tone one of pure astonishment. "Did you just call me ma'am? Do I look like your mother?" "Sorry, it's an old habit, my parents' fault. And no, you don't look like my mother. I loved my mom to death, but she never looked as good as you do, even on her best day." I couldn't believe the words that had just come out of my mouth. I cringed, but her expression softened from surprise into a mischievous grin. "So why Lucerville, Mr. Tequila Snob?" she asked. "From what I can see, you don't look like you'd have trouble getting a date." "Haven't been on one in 5 years," I mumbled. "Not since I divorced my cheating wife." Her face fell. "Oh, sorry about that." An awkward silence hung between us for a few seconds. Thankfully, she broke it. "So, back to the tequila. What do you recommend?" "I'm a big fan of Don Julio Blanco," I said, finding my footing. "And I also like the new Santo tequila from Guy Fieri and Sammy Hagar. But if it's a really special occasion, you go for the Don Julio 1942. It's pricey, but it's the real deal." "What's pricey in your opinion?" she asked. "About 185 for a bottle," I replied. She nodded, and I thought our conversation was over. I reached for a bottle of Santo from the shelf, but then an idea sparked. I extended my hand. "Mike McGowan," I said, "how about we do a little tequila tasting next door? It might help you make a more informed decision." She looked at me for a long moment, that wry smile returning, and then she accepted my hand. 2 hours later, after several glasses of tequila and some bar snacks at the pub next door, I walked out with Rosemary's phone number. The events of the next week played out in my mind in a way words can't describe. I was ecstatic just to have her number, but I knew I had to call this dazzling woman and ask her on a proper date. The last time I went on a date was sometime before the American Revolution. or so it felt. The thought suddenly struck me that we could go out to dinner, maybe find a place with roller skating, a bowling alley. My stomach churned. I had a good job, a respectable one, and I was well paid. I felt like most people liked me, and while I was politically indifferent on dates, I always kept up with current events. I realized I was sweating profusely, and then I realized that one thing had remained constant through the ages. Women, without even knowing it, completely dominate the dating world. Still, I hadn't needed to threaten her with a weapon to get her number. That, surely, was a point in my favor. My internal monologue droned on for days. I'm sure it would have continued indefinitely if fate hadn't intervened in the form of Anna Sortino, whom I ran into in the office hallway. I was still mulling over what to do about Rose when I literally bumped into Anna, sending her stumbling on her 2-inch heels. I grabbed her arms to steady her. "Sorry," I mumbled. "I know I'm not exactly tall," she said, as I helped her straighten up. "But I doubt you'd have even noticed me if not for the whole tripping over my own feet performance." A problem? Anna was about the same age as my youngest daughter. We'd chat sometimes, and I'd often give her fatherly advice. She, in turn, was my personal consultant on all things related to kids these days. If I needed a generational quirk explained in terms a 50-year-old brain could understand, and I didn't want to call my own children, Anna would break it down for me. This time, though, I just sort of hummed something non-committal, like, yeah, probably coming off like a weak-willed clown. Anna just stared at me as if she were deciphering some kind of code. Her smile, usually so characteristic, was gone. It was only natural that I seemed troubled. Her voice was so melodious, it was almost a song. "Does this problem have anything to do with a girl? A woman?" I whispered back. "Sort of. Yes. I think so. Yes." After studying me for what felt like an eternity, she finally made a decision. "All right, you can tell me about it after work, at Murphy's. And I don't want any whining into my pint, or you're on your own," she said. Later that day at the pub, as I fumbled and stammered my way through the story of Rose, Anna sat across from me, her expression one of pure amusement. "So, you haven't dated anyone since your divorce 5 years ago? Not one person? That's incredible. I knew you were a bit of a dork, Mike, but I didn't realize you'd moved the needle all the way to pathetic. No offense." She was right, and the ridicule stung, but I could see she was still trying to be kind. "How long ago did she give you her number? Are we still in the same month? The same year?" I shot back, half joking, but entirely serious. "Keep it up, Missy, and I'll put you over my knee." "It was 5 days ago." "Ooh, that could be fun for both of us," she chirped. One of us turned bright red, and it wasn't her. "Seriously, Mike, what's the holdup? You're not a troll. You've got a lot going for you." She leaned forward. "Call her." Anna then spent the next half hour schooling me on the things she and her friends did on dates. I resisted the urge to pull out a notepad. At one point, she asked, "Can you dance?" "Does the Pope have 2 left feet?" I replied. "I'll take that as a no, then." Women really like it when a man takes them dancing. It's physical, gets things moving," she said with a huge grin. "Really? I always thought that was some kind of urban legend." "100% true. It's kind of like foreplay," she said. "La la la," I sang, plugging my ears. She just watched me, then smiled again. "Oh, and by the way, don't forget to have a condom on you. You can never be too prepared," she said. looking me straight in the eye. "Yes, Mom," I replied. I called Rose on my way home that night and set a date for the following Saturday. Anna had told me not to spend too much time talking about my previous marriage, but to answer honestly if Rose asked. I wasn't comfortable discussing what had happened with a relative stranger, but Rose was incredibly empathetic. She then told me her story, which included a 15-year marriage that ended when she caught her husband in bed with one of their neighbors, Tracy. The physical pain of the syphilis was nothing compared to the humiliation I in my doctor's office. Don't get me wrong, the doctor and the two nurses were perfectly professional, but I could see the dismay in their eyes. The situation didn't improve when I had to list 6 different men as recent sexual partners for them to notify. Damn. 6 notifications, I heard one nurse whisper to the other after a quick glance at my chart. Probably a good thing she's not 25. If she'd said it to my face, I probably would have ripped it off. But I had to admit, hearing it said out loud, it sounded bad. I hadn't given it much thought, but I suppose I'd been making the most of my single life. After Mike and I divorced, and then Raph dumped me, I think I went a little crazy. Maybe I was looking for a replacement for both of them, but if I was, I never even came close. How do you replace 23 years with Mike? And how do you replace the incredible sexual connection I had with Raph? I don't know. Maybe in my mind, I was compensating for quality with quantity. I never really thought about how many men I was sleeping with until I had to list them. Without a doubt, sleeping with so many partners was stupid and irresponsible. It wasn't like I was some drunken slut. I was always sober enough to know what I was doing, and I always chose men who seemed clean and well-groomed. But I guess the old saying is true. When you sleep with someone, you're also sleeping with everyone they've recently slept with. I just never thought, idiot. At least I didn't have to tell anyone else about my problem. Mike. Rose and I got married about a year after our first date. We still had some trust issues, but we worked through them with love and the help of a very good counselor. I made love to Rose gently, and we lay on our sides, facing each other, both of us breathing hard from the effort. After 25 years of marriage, both of us now 75, making love once a week was enough. We would still spend 10 minutes just kissing and cuddling before we fell asleep. To say Rose was my savior is no exaggeration. After Tracy and I divorced, I was lost. I didn't even know how to date. She let me feel my way, sometimes literally, and we grew together. I never would have bet on it, but I found a soulmate to grow old with. Tracy. I became a bit more selective in my partners after I got back out there, following my issue. Part of it was probably menopause. Another part was that while I still looked good for my age, the 20 and 30 somethings weren't looking my way anymore. In fact, with so many more single women than men in their 40s and 50s, the competition was pretty stiff, even in my own age bracket. If you had asked me a few years ago, I would have told you it was a done deal. I was going to grow old with my loving husband, Mike. But because I was an idiot, that's not how things turned out. I played games with him. I mistook his kindness for weakness. I thought he loved me so much that he would forgive my transgression. A few years ago, I moved into a retirement community. My old house was far too big for just me. I see my children and grandchildren every few months, It took years for my relationship with my kids to feel anything close to normal again. Mike and I remained friendly, though we stopped having lunch together after I finally understood it wasn't going to get me any closer to him. After several years as a hermit, Mike finally started dating again. I admit, I'm jealous of the way he looks at Rose. When the whole family gets together for the holidays, I can't help but notice the adoring glances, the cute way they interact. It makes me want to throw up. That should be me. Was it worth it? I ask myself that question all the time. I never like the answer.